Oh, mama, welcome back. Merry Christmas, everybody. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis back on Kings of the North. Landis, did you have a lovely holiday?
Yeah. Scrambling a little bit, but lovely holiday nonetheless.
Yeah, no. You were out of town briefly, and then now you're back, right? Is that part of the deal?
Yeah, went out to Pittsburgh just for the day, and then came back last night. And then when I should have done work, I slept instead. So here I am this morning, getting stuff together for our transfer portal show.
Yeah, because we're going to talk about the portal. We hope everybody had a great Christmas Eve and a Christmas Day. We didn't do the show for 2 days, and I kind of forgot how to do it. I'm sort of like waking up this morning. I'm like, what is this exactly that we do again? But we're going to take a break from the playoff discussion because we were sort of saying this as Bill, you and I and producer Mike were talking about it. We don't need to preview the quarterfinal games 5 different times, right? And we're going to get there, and we're going to be live in Pasadena and in New Orleans. You and I are both going to fly on Sunday, and then next Monday and Tuesday, it might not be at noon Eastern, but we'll have 2 big shows live on site, having talked to people, having absorbed the vibes. So we're definitely going to give you firsthand information about Oregon, Ohio State, and Notre Dame, Georgia. And of course, we're going to check in on Boise State, Penn State as well. We'll kind of ignore Arizona State, Texas. So we're going to do that. We're going to have plenty of that. This is our last show this week, and we're going to run through all 28 Northern teams and how they've done in the portal so far, Bill, because this portal window closes Saturday, and that's the last day for guys to go in. It doesn't mean that every decision is made and announced by Saturday, but we'll know at least who's available, and a bunch of guys are getting signed. So this is a good time to update so that all 28 of our fan bases can get a little action here.
Yeah, it's informative for us too, I think, to like take a step back and see what's going on. And it'll change. Like, stuff will happen probably as we're talking. Stuff will happen before the weekends, and then there's the second portal window as well. But this is a little snapshot of where things stand right now. And we got some teams doing work in the portal.
Yeah, looking at the 24/7 Sports Composite transfer portal ratings, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of our 28 teams that are ranked in the top 25 transfer portal classes. Wisconsin is the best, number 7 in the nation, number 1 among our 28 Northern teams. Then Nebraska's number 10, Minnesota 11, Oregon 12, Colorado 14, Kansas 18, Michigan State 19, Utah 20, and Indiana 25. So if you're trying to get a handle on, how's my school doing? We want to give a little compare and contrast here. By how many transfer portal players have been added by our 28 Northern teams? The high so far is 17, Landis, for any of our teams. The low is 2. So that is quite a different transfer strategy. Kansas has 17 portal guys. I like what Kansas has done, a lot of really interesting stuff. And then there's some teams that are a little just slower on the draw, but it doesn't mean they haven't added anybody good. Some teams are really restocking their rosters. Others are being more pinpoint. Pitt and Iowa have 2. Penn State has 3. Notre Dame and Northwestern 4. Ohio State, Iowa State, BYU, West Virginia 5. And that probably will change by the end of the show because still things are happening right now. The most, Kansas 17, Wisconsin 16, Minnesota 15. Utah, Michigan State, Colorado 12, Nebraska, Washington 11, Indiana, Purdue 10. So different strategies, man.
Yeah, different strategies for sure. It's interesting. Like a lot of the teams too that like Wisconsin, I think we're going to start with. Like they're loading up because a lot of guys left. So it's not only like, hey, nice job, you got all these guys. It's like, whoa, your roster had a giant hole in it. So good job by making some moves to fill it up.
We are not going to do a good job of that today in the offseason. I hope we'll take a step back and do a better job of that because the transfer portal is an equation. It is not just the in. It is the out plus the in. Minus the out plus the in, are you a better or worse team after transfer portal season? The guys that you're leaving to graduation or the NFL, that's all normal. But I think it is fair to judge everything that happens in the portal, Landis. And we'll do that. We'll make that an off-season show. Are you better or worse? Did you get better or worse in the portal? I think that's not how we're thinking about it today. We're just focusing on the end. But in the end, that's what really matters. So it's like, hey, Wisconsin, congratulations. 7th best transfer portal class. Well, because your roster kind of got decimated.
Yeah.
Illinois is rebuilding its defensive line out of Wisconsin right now, right?
Wisconsin players, yeah.
So, okay. So we want to acknowledge, and there's a couple like really important quarterback decisions that have been made that we want to talk about. But we don't want to talk about only quarterbacks. So we're going to go through all the teams. We'll start with the teams that are not in a bowl, because for those fan bases, maybe you're not getting as much juice right now, right? What else? So we're going to start with those 8 northern teams, and the first is Wisconsin, Bill.
The first is Wisconsin, and we talked about Billy Edwards, right? The quarterback from Maryland. We talked about him more in like the Michigan, because there was a time where we thought he was going to go to Michigan. He's actually going to Wisconsin. So they're doing the transfer quarterback thing again, but they have 2 of them in this class, which is interesting. Billy Edwards from Maryland, Danny O'Neal from San Diego State. So it's like they got their current guy and possibly their future guy to settle a room that lost a lot of players. They really did have to make over nearly the entire quarterback room at Wisconsin. They've done a nice job of that. Wisconsin also got maybe, I think, a guy who at the end, like maybe by the end of next year, we look back and people think this of him already. It's Tanner Koziol, the tight end from Ball State, who was number 2 in the country in tight end receptions behind Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green, just among the most productive tight ends in college football. And that happened pretty early. So it's like, I think it's maybe out of sight, out of mind for people, but by the end of next season, we might be thinking to ourselves like, boy, Tanner Koziol is Wisconsin's entire offense, or at the very least, a highly featured component of an offense that's looking to take a step forward. Obviously, more offensive weapons for Wisconsin. Mark Hamper, former FCS all-freshman guy from Idaho State, incredibly productive receiver there. So they're hoping that production will translate. Took a swing on Jaden Ballard from Ohio State at receiver. Like we've seen the former highly rated Ohio State receiver who doesn't break through in Columbus move on elsewhere, and it doesn't hit a ton. Jamison Williams is probably the best example of it, but there are far more examples of guys not doing a whole lot. But Jaden Ballard, I guess, will try to break that mold a little bit at Wisconsin. You alluded to Illinois raiding Wisconsin's defensive line room, so Wisconsin had to make up for it. Got some intriguing players. Charles Perkins from UT Martin's a really good FCS player. Parker Peterson from Tulane, I think, was a guy who would have been recruited higher, but he was in the COVID recruiting class and kind of fell by the wayside a little bit. Was a good player at Tulane. Was it 1, 2, 3? It's like 5 guys they're bringing in on the defensive line. A couple guys in the secondary too, including Matthew Trainer from Richmond, another really productive FCS player. So Wisconsin's lost a lot. When we have that conversation, we'll talk about whether or not Wisconsin is better off given some of the guys that they lost. But I think this is a pretty nice class for Luke Fickell, and it does feel to me like in a year that's really important for the Badgers that Luke Fickell is taking some swings here to try to jumpstart a rebuild with some high impact transfers. Yeah,
and when you have an offensive coordinator change, you're going to lose some stuff. So they couldn't sit still. So it's hard because when you haven't succeeded, sitting still, I think, is the worst option, right? So at the very least, they're not doing that. So they're going to be basically a completely different program. And even you talked about the 2 guys coming in. One of the guys going out is Mabry Matoyer, who a year ago was like, hey, well, at least Wisconsin at quarterback has Mabry Matoyer out of Texas, who looks like a guy who could be an answer down the road. I was wondering if they should have said, let's just bag it and play Mabry Matoyer last year and start the future. And he's out. So they've completely redone their quarterback room, but you get a guy at Danny O'Neal from San Diego State, who's the same age as Mabry Matoyer, but just played a whole season of college football. Right. You understand that trade, but it's a complete reset for Wisconsin. And
it is. On both sides of the ball.
On both sides of the ball. I mean, their most dynamic receiver is going to be a really important part of a really major Northern team next year, right? So they're losing some. They didn't keep much anything, honestly. It is. Because the best portal stuff is keep your best guys, add good guys. But this is a little bit more lose good guys and hope to add good guys.
Yeah, it's especially disappointing. Well, I don't know if disappointing is the right word. We'll have to see how it ultimately shakes out. But when you're a program like Wisconsin, that doesn't have a good season, but you do have a couple of like individual bright spots throughout that season, and then those guys leave too.
The bright spots leave,
yeah, they don't stick around. So
yeah,
it's a fascinating offseason for Wisconsin. I don't know that they're done just yet, but when this is all said and done, that roster is going to look drastically different.
They did keep Trech Kekahuna, who was one of the receivers who went in the portal and then came back out of the portal and stayed. So that's an example of a good player staying. So that's good news for Wisconsin. For sure. All right. Next up is Northwestern, who has a chance to be one of the top 5 most impactful Northern quarterback transfers, and maybe even higher than that.
Perhaps higher than that. Yeah. Preston Stone from SMU, who we've discussed a few times that, I quite liked. He was the reason that I picked SMU to win the ACC in our outrageous predictions episode way back. 13-3 as a starter at SMU. I just think like a good player who got a little sidetracked by injury and then was in a room with another good quarterback, obviously, and Kevin Jennings, and things kind of unraveled from there. But I think he's still got a lot to him. And even if he's something less than what he was 2 years ago when he was SMU starter, when SMU went to the American Athletic Conference championship game with him at quarterback, he will be substantially better than anything Northwestern has had a quarterback in, I don't even know, 5 years. Like
he's the best guy since Peyton Ramsey, since Indiana transfer Peyton Ramsey led Northwestern to the Big Ten title game.
In 2020, right? Yeah. So like this is a huge deal, because we were staring at that quarterback situation going, I don't know what they're going to do and how long it's going to take Northwestern to dig out of this. And it's not that Preston Stone necessarily sets you up well for the future. Northwestern still has to figure that part out, but it's nice to have a bridge to that now with a proven productive starter in Preston Stone. So not a lot else going on portal wise for Northwestern. They added Xavier Gray from Liberty, who's an offensive tackle who was first team Conference USA last year. He's huge. He's 6'8", 340 pounds. I was watching him a little bit because he's from Ohio, and I wondered if Ohio State might take a look at him. And I don't think that ever happened. But as you can imagine, 6'8", 340 can really move some people in the run game. So that's a nice addition on the offensive line for Northwestern as well. And they also got another former like big time recruit who has probably not been quite as productive as a college player as people thought he might be given his recruiting pedigree, but it's Yanni Karlaftis from Purdue, linebacker, younger brother of George Karlaftis. So he started 12 games at Purdue. He's played almost 1,000 career snaps. So that's an experienced Big Ten linebacker who should be able to be plug and play on Northwestern's defense too. So not a lot, but I think, two very high impact guys, I think, with Preston Stone and Xavier Gray and a guy in Yanni Karlaftis, so I think you're taking an interesting swing on and see if you can't get more out of them than Purdue did.
Yeah, I mean, Preston Stone, that's a big get for Northwestern. That is better than I mean, again, compared to where they were last year, that I would argue they were the only Northern team that started a portal quarterback in 2024 that didn't work. And so now they're going back in the portal, and they're going back in with a purpose. This is just this early window. If you go in with a purpose, like everybody has, these are plans being executed. And I think fans understand that now, that you can have as much of a portal plan as you do a recruiting plan. This is less desperation. Sometimes you get out of spring football and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe we don't have a guy who can do this. And now if you're in the portal, then doesn't mean there's not good players there, but it's a different idea. This is plan. So I don't exactly know how Northwestern did it, but they executed the quarterback plan, and they didn't sit on their hands and just say, oh, well, let's just hope Jack Lausch gets better. Well, that's a good plan to have Jack Lausch gets better. Why not have Jack Lausch get better behind Preston Stone, who's been playing college football forever, has been a successful starter? Good for Northwestern.
Yeah, I want to dig in more on how this happened. Because it doesn't. Preston Stone to me should maybe I'm just too high on Preston Stone, but I felt like it's a guy who should have a fairly robust market. Now I'm not talking like top of the board kind of market, but maybe like the second tier, third tier kind of guy, and like Northwestern got him, like, which is great for Northwestern, but it's a little surprising.
Yeah. All right. Next up is Maryland. Lost two major guys out of their backfield. Billy Edwards, the starting quarterback, as we talked about, is going to Wisconsin, and Roman Henby, their really good running back, is headed to Indiana. They also lost two tight ends. Their big get is Jalil Farouk, who is a guy going home. He was a Maryland high school commit who committed to Oklahoma. This is how long ago this was. Committed to Oklahoma with Caleb Williams, because Caleb Williams was a DC kid. It was like, hey, these two Maryland DC kids are going to Oklahoma. to play for Lincoln Riley. Jaleel Farouk's going to catch passes from Caleb Williams. Think about everything that has happened to Caleb Williams since then. Takes over as a starting quarterback his freshman year at Oklahoma, follows Lincoln Riley to USC, wins the Heisman, comes back, doesn't win the Heisman the next year, gets drafted number 1, playing his rookie season in the NFL. And Jaleel Farouk, who was a big-time dude, a 4-star dude, is now going back home to Maryland for his last year. 45 catches for 694 yards last year. He looks like a number 1 receiver. And this has a chance to be, I think this has a chance to be a guy we talk about next year. And the guy who has a chance to be, I think, a great story for Maryland. They also added Dorian Fleming, was a second-team All-Sun Belt tight end from Georgia State, more than 600 yards receiving. He has 3 years of eligibility left. That's a nice grab. They added a couple cornerbacks in the portal because they lost 7 Maryland cornerbacks went in the portal. They added 2. But the other interesting one is a 4-star quarterback from the class of 2022 who could be their future at quarterback, Bill. It's Justin Martin, who was like a top 15, top 20 quarterback in his class. Was at UCLA for 2 years, has 3 years of eligibility left with a Southern California kid who stayed home at UCLA and is looking for a chance to play. And this is a nice swing for Maryland. And what Justin Martin is saying and making this commitment is Mike Locksley still has juice with quarterbacks. They believe that he is a guy that can help a quarterback develop and maybe take an NFL shot. So they lost Billy Edwards. We would guess MJ Morris is the guy next year, but they might have added the guy who's going to be their quarterback. And again, here we are having a portal conversation. We're talking about future quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. He also might transfer to his third school 12 months from now. Who knows? But interesting swing at quarterback for Maryland.
Justin Martin was the guy who started against Penn State, and then after the game, James Franklin said, like, that guy should be their starting quarterback. But then Ethan Garbers retook the job over, right? Okay. To close out that year when he was hurt. Justin Martin played for him. I thought actually played pretty well for UCLA against Penn State. He definitely has something to him, and I would also view this as like they're still not sure about MJ Morris because I think if they were because they have to have about the same amount of eligibility left, I'd imagine.
Yeah, no, this could be
3 years.
Yeah. I mean, he could be the starting quarterback next year, but he doesn't have to be the starting quarterback next year. But he feels like a starter at some point for Maryland with a pretty good pedigree. So, like what Maryland's done, and I really like what this next team has done, which is Kansas, which has added more than anybody in the North. Some offensive line work, and this is the thing anymore. If you are a young starter who makes an all-conference team in the group of 5, you're getting sucked into the portal.
Yes.
Like if it's almost like G5 teams don't play young tackles because they're getting stolen. There's no doubt about it. Everybody here, it's like, oh, he was all Sun Belt. He was all Conference USA. It was all like gone. So Kansas got active. DeAndre Harper from Northwest Missouri State. He could be their answer at left tackle. He has 3 years of eligibility remaining. That's FCS. They got Jack Tanner from Tulsa. Started several games as a true freshman this year. He can help them a lot. Tyler Mercer from North Texas has 4 years of eligibility left. Made 6 starts for North Texas this year. That's 3 young offensive linemen with a boatload of eligibility left that Lance Leipold was just like, bunk, 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 bunk. Mm-hmm. That's what your job would be. You would be offensive line portal consultant. And they would just have you watch film on FCS, D2, and G5 guys all year and be like, Landis, tell us who we should steal.
I'd love that job.
Don't leave me for that job. A couple other guys that aren't just young. Joseph Sipp, first team All-MAC linebacker from Bowling Green. He's going to start at Kansas next year. Cam Pickett, Ball State receiver, was third team All-MAC. He's going to jump up at Kansas. They got a guy named Gage Keys who was at Kansas, was a part of their defensive line rotation, transferred to Auburn last year, basically did nothing and now transferred back, which is lovely. They added LaShawn Williams, running back from Iowa, who kind of got passed by Caleb Johnson this year, but ran for 800 yards at Iowa a couple years ago. He's going to help them. And then the biggest one actually is probably Jaleel Hurley, who's a cornerback from Alabama, who was a top 50 national recruit in the class of 2023 and hasn't played much. But so the thing I like about the Kansas class is offensive line, multiple guys. couple jump up guys who can start right away, who like were really good players in the MAC and stuff like that. And then like a guy like Joseph Sipp to Jaleel Hurley, first team all MAC to an Alabama guy who didn't play but was a top 50 recruit. You're on both ends of the spectrum in the portal, and you're taking a swing on both. And we have history of both those types of guys working out. So it's not just a lot of guys. It's Kansas. I feel like it's really calculated and well done.
And they're going to have to be that, right? I think we understand that about Kansas. It's not going to be a team that is able to build through high school recruiting. Doesn't mean you don't do it and you don't prioritize it, but you need to do this every year.
Yeah, but that's okay. But then go do it and have a plan. And they went and did it, and they had a plan. So same thing with Purdue, with Barry Odom trying to rebuild at Purdue.
Yeah, they got some work to do at Purdue. They're north of 30 guys out of the program.
Yeah.
Via the transfer portal after moving on or switching head coaches to Barry Odom from Ryan Walters. Some just like massive departures via the portal, including Dylan Thieneman, Max Clare, and Will Helt, who all went to major power programs, Oregon, Ohio State, Clemson. So far, Purdue's only added 10 guys via the portal, and like I said, they got a lot to do. Malachi Singleton, the quarterback from Arkansas, is the most interesting one. Former 4-star recruit, like pretty highly rated guy who went to Arkansas. Hasn't played a ton, but if he's probably going to be Purdue's starting quarterback next year, unless they're able to make some other kind of addition. Like they don't have much in that room. They lost Ryan Brown via transfer. They lost Marcus Davila via transfer. Hudson Card is out of eligibility. Like that's a quarterback room that needs totally remade, but it seems like Malachi Singleton will be at the head of it and get his shot to show that he can be a power conference quarterback for the Boilermakers. And then the other, I guess, most notable one is Jalen St. John. He's an offensive tackle from UNLV. That's Barry Odom bringing a guy with him. He's brought a few guys with him so far from UNLV, but Jalen St. John thus far is the only one that was a starter and like definitely will be a starter for Purdue. The other guys from UNLV were like backups, reserves, depth kind of pieces that, you know, with the way the roster looks right now for Purdue, probably will end up starting for them too. But it's interesting. So Barry Odom was the defensive coordinator at Arkansas before he took the head coaching job at UNLV. And basically everything Purdue's done in the portal has been guys from Arkansas and guys from UNLV. Okay. So they got a pair of linebackers from Arkansas too, Alex Sanford and Carson Dean. Again, like two guys who haven't played a ton, but I think will play a lot for Purdue. So it's a tough rebuild. I don't know what they're going to be able to do on the fly this offseason. It might make more sense to just try to fast forward to next offseason for Barry Odom to really reshape the roster, but they're trying. But you know, 30, I think it's 31 out and thus far only 10 in via the portal.
It gives me a better appreciation for what Curt Cignetti did with the JMU guys, because it's like you just did a new job and you take your old team with you, and it's like, well, it's not a given, right? So I'm watching Barry Odom, UNLV to Purdue, and it's not the exact same thing. And watching Rich Rodriguez, Jacksonville State to West Virginia, I'm just waiting for the avalanches of like, you came from a lower level good team and here they come, and it doesn't guarantee that you're going to get 13 starters from your old team to follow you. So as much as we like talked a lot about the JMU influence on Indiana, like it was a real thing that Curt Cignetti did. So it's a nice template for people to try to follow, but it's not a guarantee that you're going to get the merged two teams when you step up as a head coach. So I'm still very curious to see like what else they get. Because again, we talked about Haj Malik Williams and UNLV, and right, he was trying to get, you thought he might try to get an extra year or something, but like anyway, like I just whatever. Ricky White's not going to Purdue, right?
Yeah, there was Ricky White's probably going to go to the NFL, I'd imagine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Haj Malik Williams like had an injury while he was at Campbell that it looked to me like maybe he could apply for one, but I haven't seen any reporting that he's trying.
Yeah. So anyway, all right. Michigan State, they're doing a lot of work too. Michigan State, number 19 class right now, according to 24/7.
Yeah, they've added 12 guys. And they are doing some good work. What's perhaps more important and more noteworthy, and I know this is more about what's coming in than what's going out, but Michigan State like didn't lose a ton of like really high impact players going out of the program, which I think maybe you worry about sometimes with the newer coaching staff. They lost cornerback Charles Brantley. They lost receiver Jaron Glover, but they've done a pretty good job, especially at the receiver position. They've added two lower level sort of like explosive playmakers who I think could be slot guys at Michigan State, but don't necessarily have to be slot guys. One is Omari Kelly from Middle Tennessee State. The other is Krishawn McCray from Kent State. I think just like add a lot of speed to what Michigan State's trying to do on offense. And we know about Nick Marsh there. It's like you need some compliments to Nick Marsh. They added in the backfield as well with the running back Elijah, I think it's Tolliver from Sacramento State. Big Sky, honorable mention guy, pretty productive, 950 rushing yards for Sacramento State this past year. They also added a defensive end, Anelu Lafaele from Wisconsin, who has 4 years of remaining eligibility. Basically didn't play at all for Wisconsin this year, but he was a very highly rated prospect in the 2024 recruiting class. So that is just like, that's basically like getting a guy out of high school, but he was rated as a 4-star transfer too. So he didn't explode as a true freshman, but people I think are pretty still fired up about what he could become. And there's a change of scenery now for him at Michigan State. So they've not made like what I would consider super splashy additions, but they have added 12 guys thus far. I'm sure they're going to add more. And it seems like more, I don't know, like marginal is not the right word for it, but like some incremental improvements at some key positions for Michigan State rather than like going out there and taking some massive swings on, like bigger name guys from bigger programs who maybe haven't done a whole lot yet or that kind of like it seems like maybe with the exception of Lafaele from Wisconsin that Michigan State is banking on production, even if it's a production from lower levels than splashy kind of names.
And can we count not having a blue blood come steal Nick Marsh as a portal win for Michigan State?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like this is one of these things. Nick Marsh is probably the third best true freshman receiver in the country behind Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams, and he's at Michigan State. And just Lane Kiffin's probably sniffing around, right? Like just like one of those things, like keep that guy. That's how our teams have to succeed. Is they have to find the right guys on the way up. They have to find guys probably from the SEC who weren't getting a chance, but they have to keep their own guys. So Nick Marsh, still a Spartan, is a win in my book.
Yeah, I agree.
Utah in a little bit of a tough spot. They did add the guy who is ranked as the number 2 running back in the portal overall, Wayshawn Parker from Washington State, who followed his coach, the running backs coach from Washington State, was hired by Utah. This is a pretty big deal. As a true freshman last year, rushed for 734 yards and 4 touchdowns on only 137 carries. So to replace Mekhi Bernard, this Wayshawn Parker is going to be a guy that you're going to hear from at Utah. And then they've added 3 guys from New Mexico who follow Jason Beck, the offensive coordinator hire, including Devin Dampier. Again, that was several weeks ago, so we've talked about that, but he's going to be the starting quarterback for Utah. They also added the 2nd leading receiver from New Mexico and the 3rd leading rusher, 2nd leading rusher among backs because Dampier runs. So that's a nice little boost to follow the OC. That matters, and so Dampier's going to have 2 guys he's familiar with. They've had a couple tough things. They lost Cam Calhoun, freshman corner, to Alabama. I think they were surprised Keanu Tanavasa, one of their really good defensive linemen, went in the portal. I'm not sure they were expecting that. They thought they had a guy named Joseph William, who was the American Athletic Conference Freshman of the Year at receiver. He committed to Utah in the portal, but then he flipped to Colorado. And they had another running back who they thought they had out of the portal who then flipped to Arkansas. So they've had a couple tough things, but to get Devin Dampier and Wayshawn Parker, they're probably going to be the 2 most important guys on the offense next year for Utah. And that's a really big deal. And then just to keep an eye on, it's an Ohio kid, Brendan Zerbrug, an Ohio kid who committed to Oklahoma, was 1 year at Oklahoma as a quarterback, had offers from like Syracuse and Northwestern, a couple other schools coming out, and is transferred to Utah. I don't know. Maybe down the line we'll hear from him. But it's kind of like a little like interesting, kind of under the radar. Northern kid goes to Oklahoma, now comes back to one of our northern schools. Let's keep an eye on that. They kind of did what they needed to do, but they also could have been even better in the portal. They've had a couple tough breaks.
Yeah, well, the program looked on the brink of something perhaps quite well, disastrous is too strong of a word.
Yeah, no, I like we get
so
it.
While it's been a highly successful program, obviously, I'm not surprised, or I guess I wouldn't be surprised if there was a little bit of selling on the future of things that had to be done there that might have held them back a little bit.
Yeah. So let's move to Cincinnati. Now, Cincinnati, probably the most interesting thing, they added a guy who was a finalist for the Walter Payton Award for the best player in FCS out of Lindenwood. And I got confused for a little bit. I was like, oh my God, they played him. Kansas played Lindenwood this year. But I wonder if, like, in the course of film watching, Big 12 schools were like, oh, this Lindenwood guy is good. He played against Kansas this year. Jeff Caldwell, 53 catches, 1,032 yards, 11 touchdowns. He is probably going to be Cincinnati's best receiver next year. Probably going to like fill the Xavier Henderson role. So that's a really big deal. Also, by the way, again, keeping your own guys, Joe Royer, the tight end, said he's staying at Cincinnati. So that was like a big win for them as well. They've added a couple other guys in the portal. Out of receiver, Caleb Goody was Colorado State's leading receiver. They added him. They added Cyrus Allen from Texas A&M. They got a good kicker from Charlotte that mattered. They added a couple guys. They need to fill in on the offensive line. They added an Albany transfer who was in 2023, made Phil Steele's freshman All-American team at Albany. He made 27 consecutive starts in Albany. His name's Nolan Latulipi. So he has a chance, I think, to start on the offensive line for Cincinnati, and they added a Ball State offensive lineman too, named Teron Tayo, and then Matthew McDoom, which is a great name, Coastal Carolina corner. Couple offensive linemen, couple receivers, including a number one receiver, and you keep Royer. I think it's decent. What Cincinnati's done. Yeah. So, all right, quick break. Those are our 8 non-bowl teams and what they've done in the portal. When we come back, we'll talk about a couple of the bowls that are getting ready to happen, including one kicking off in about an hour and a half involving one of our northern teams. And we'll get back to what's going on in the portal next on KOTN. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis back on Kings of the North. If you still want to join our bowl pool, you're certainly still invited to. You've only missed a couple. Poolpartygaming.com. We're having a bracket pick'em. It's too late for that, but you can join our bowl pool. And we have a bowl game kicking off, Bill, at 2 p.m. Pitt versus Toledo in the Game Above Sports Bowl. It's the Detroit Bowl. It used to be called, I think, a Pizza Bowl. Pittsburgh versus Toledo, and it sounds like we're getting a walk-on at quarterback, maybe, for Pitt.
We sure are. Yeah. Eli Holstein, who I think Pat Narduzzi had expressed some hope would play in this game in points leading up to it, will not play against Toledo today. We're going to get walk-on redshirt freshman David Lynch starting for Pitt. He has appeared in 2 games this year. The quarterback situation is not great. Obviously, Nate Arnell went to the transfer portal for Pitt. I think one of their other backups also went to the transfer portal. So they're clearly running pretty low on options. So it will be a walk-on, rather inexperienced redshirt freshman for the Panthers in this one. Also, Kanata Mumpfield, really good Pitt receiver, opted out. He's not playing. He's getting ready for the NFL draft. So I don't know what Pitt's going to do on offense.
I don't know. That's okay. They'll figure it out. Yeah. Just the way it is. And again, like this would be a nice, I guess they don't want that. It could have been like a nice showcase for Nate Yarnell, who did a pretty decent job at times filling in when Eli Holstein was hurt this year, but he's already committed to North Texas. It's a Texas school. He already made his choice and is going to have a chance to go be a starter somewhere. So he didn't stick around, which makes sense that he didn't stick around. Texas State. So good luck to Nate Yarnell, but it just puts you in a tough spot. All right. The other bowl today involving northern teams is Rutgers, Kansas State at 5:30 Eastern in the Rate Bowl. This is in Phoenix. No Kyle Monangai. Kyle Monangai is the main guy that is an opt-out here, the great Rutgers running back. Totally understand why he's not playing in this game. Kansas State, chance to win back-to-back bowl games for the first time since 2016, 2017. So it'd be nice to see Kyle Monangai, but it's going to be Avery Johnson versus Ethan Kaliak-Manis in a quarterback battle, which I don't even know. Other than how many bowl games are you going to get this year where you get both starting quarterbacks? That's pretty good.
Yeah, probably not all that many. No, those 2 guys playing is enough for me to check in on what's going on there. Yeah, as a springboard for both of the next year.
Yeah. No, we'll take that. Then a couple Friday games: Syracuse, Washington State, Friday at 8 in the what's the name of this one? The
It's the
Direct
Holiday
TV.
Bowl.
Oh, it's the Holiday Bowl. I heard of that one. Now they call it the
Yeah.
Direct TV Holiday Bowl. You can just say Holiday Bowl. That's in San Diego,
San
8
Diego.
p.m. And Kyle McCord is playing or no?
Kyle McCord is playing. Yeah.
Okay.
Kyle McCord, who for some reason, like in multiple interviews, wasn't willing to say whether or not he was going to play, but then did confirm he is going to play. Fran Brown said like Syracuse guys don't opt out. So Syracuse has some guys who have entered the transfer portal who obviously won't play. But I think as we're having this conversation, there are no plans for anyone who is able to play opting out of this game for Syracuse. There was some concern that Washington State may not be able to play at all, because Jake Dickert and the entire coaching staff left to go to Wake Forest.
Oh.
And when that happened, I think Washington State lost north of 20 players to the portal immediately. So they're really scrambling for coaches and players, but they are playing. They emphatically said Washington State intends on playing in the Holiday Bowl. So you're going to get a really shorthanded Wazoo here. No John Mateer at quarterback for the Cougs. But you're all going to get Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord, John Mateer would have been absolutely electric. I'm quite bummed we're not going to get that, but you will get to see Kyle McCord play in what is likely to be, although I guess he is hoping or trying for it not to be, his last game at Syracuse.
If John Mateer, who transferred to Oklahoma, is going to be the starting quarterback at Oklahoma next year, Kyle McCord, John Mateer would have been a better quarterback matchup than some of the playoff games.
Mm-hmm.
Like that would have been, if we would have done like all games, like that's probably better than Drew Aller and Maddox Madsen, right? I mean, it's just like it would have been. I'm
wondering.
crazy.
I'm trying to think if it's the best. Is it the best?
It would have been the best. Yeah, it might be better than the national title game, because the national title game might be Dylan Gabriel versus Riley Leonard, and it's like, I don't know. I think I might want to see John Mateer and Kyle McCord. Sorry, bro. So
for entertainment value anyway. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, but we're not getting that. So a couple Saturday games, Boston College, Nebraska. This is quite an interesting. I like this one. And then do we know this, right? That Nebraska playing 2 consecutive Northern bangers. They're ending this game in the Pinstripe Bowl in New York City versus Boston College, and they're opening next year versus Cincinnati in Kansas City in a game that was originally scheduled for Indy, got moved to KC. But like Nebraska, like, come on, like what? They're standing up. They're rising up for the North, brother. They don't have to be playing Boston College and Cincinnati, but they're doing it for us, man.
I do appreciate them doing that. I wish they weren't playing in Arrowhead, only because like I don't need to see Dylan Raiola just fully go Patrick Mahomes mode. But it'll be a fun game when it happens.
Yeah. So it feels like there might be some Boston College opt-outs here. That there's some talk about this. Maybe Donovan Ezeraku, the great defensive end, former guest on KOTN, may not play. Which, if you're going to be a first-round pick or day 1 or 2 NFL pick, you're probably not playing in the Pinstripe Bowl. But I think there's enough here, Landis, for this to be pretty interesting. So I'm going to watch it. I'm into it. You into it?
I'll check in. Yeah, I'm into it.
Iowa State, Miami is also on Saturday at 3:30. This is the Pop-Tarts Bowl. So people are going to be excited to see who's going to get eaten. But we're not getting the full the full Iowa State effect, are we, or are we?
We're not? I thought we were.
Are we? Tell me.
I was reading this morning that there are no expected opt-outs for Iowa State.
My God. It's freaking Cyclones. What a bunch of champions they are. Is Cam Ward playing for Miami?
Cam Ward's supposed to play. I think the only major name for Miami that people seem uncertain about is wide receiver Xavier Restrepo, but Cam Ward is expected to play. All of Iowa State's guys are expected to play as Iowa State looks for the first 11-win season in program history.
Let's go.
This has an opportunity to be a pretty compelling ball game. I'm excited for it.
All right, so then this is going to be a great day. So now you got me fired up because we're also getting a great Saturday night game, 7:30, BYU and Colorado. And Deion Sanders said all the Colorado guys are playing in the Alamo Bowl, and they got gigantic insurance policies for Travis Hunter and Shadur Sanders. So, and I think if we're getting for real, Iowa State, Miami, and BYU, Colorado, if we get pretty good versions of what they were during the season, bangers, absolute bangers. These are 4 top 25 teams, no doubt about it. And again, BYU and Colorado both played in the Big 12 this year, but they did not play each other And so there were 4 teams that finished tied for first in the Big 12. 2 of them played each other in the Big 12 championship game, Arizona State and Iowa State. These are the other 2. So tiebreakers go a little bit different. This could have been a play-in game for a playoff spot. Instead, we're getting it in the Alamo Bowl, and everybody seems to be playing. So let's go, Landis.
Yeah, this will be. My flight for LA for the Rose Bowl is 5:00 in the morning on Sunday, but I might try to stay up to watch this whole thing anyway.
Oh, then you'll be tired on the flight. Is it 5:00 in the morning? You're gonna have to wake up at like 2:30 in the morning.
Yeah, it's gonna suck.
5 a.m.
Yeah.
Wow, you're dedicated, and you're just gonna get out there and hit the ground, boots on the ground, just start filling it up for our KOTN audience.
That is the plan.
You're a crazy person. Okay, transfer updates for the playoff teams. Indiana, did they get anybody?
They did. Yeah, they got a guy or 2. Another program, like they're not done. They're only at 10 commits right now. It's number 25 class according to 24/7 Sports, with only 10 commits. So that's pretty good. Fernando Mendoza, they got the number 3 transfer quarterback in the portal. They did. From the university, or no, is it Cal? What is it? University of California? It's Cal. Yeah, University of California at Berkeley. Fernando, incredibly productive player, 3,000 passing yards this year. I actually did not realize he has 2 years of eligibility left.
Oh yeah,
I don't know that he'll use both. But that'd be a heck of a thing for Indiana to get 2 years out of Fernando Mendoza after getting one very good year out of Curtis Rourke. And if I get like 2 years of Mendoza and then it's Tyler Cherry time for the Hoosiers, I could very much get behind that idea. So it was a huge huge win, obviously, for Indiana to get him. They absolutely needed a transfer portal quarterback with Curtis Rourke out of eligibility and Taven Jackson deciding to transfer as well. So they got him in Mendoza, one of the better quarterbacks available. They also got one of the better defensive linemen in the portal with Hosea Wheeler from Western Kentucky, who's a first-team All-Conference USA player. And they're going to have to replace CJ West, the Kent State transfer they got last year, like in the middle of their defensive line, and also James Carpenter from James Madison. And this guy can do it. Like he is an incredibly disruptive defensive tackle, just like major space-eating presence in the middle of that defensive line for Indiana. So only 10 commits, as I said, but with Mendoza and Wheeler, I think 2 of the better individual players, regardless of position, in the portal. They also added Roman Hemby from Maryland, who you alluded to earlier, and they also got a second running back, Lee Beebe Jr. from UAB, who was 3rd-team All AAC this year, had almost 900 rushing yards. So that's probably their starting running back tandem next year.
Okay.
If I had to guess, would be Roman Hemby and Lee Beebe Jr. with Fernando Mendoza in the backfield with them and Hosea Wheeler holding it down on the defensive line. So 10 commits total. 4, I think, pretty impactful moves thus far. And I would imagine more are coming for the Hoosiers.
This feels like proof of concept to me, that this is almost as important as them making the playoff. I mean, obviously not. But then, like, what is making the playoff get you? And it gets you Fernando Mendoza. Okay.
Yeah.
Here we go. It gets you Roman Hemby. That I think, do you agree with the idea that Indiana can be part of the second tier in the Big Ten now and in the future?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think with getting it starts with what they did at James Madison. But if they got Curtis Rourke and got a productive season out of him, and now they get Mendoza, if they are going to be a destination for quarterbacks, high school transfer or whatever, then yes, I think that gives them the staying power. That is the most important thing, I think, for you to have that kind of staying power. And they seem to have, as you said, proof of concept there.
I'm not sure why Indiana couldn't be the 6th best program in the Big Ten over the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan rising back up, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like your Big 4. And then it's like, who's 5, who's 6, who's 7? And I think Indiana's right in that mix. So
I think so. I think at least I think they could be. Yeah, I definitely think they could be.
Yeah. Better than USC. Lincoln Riley wishes he was Indiana right now. You wish, Lincoln Riley. Should we squeeze in USC? Let's squeeze in a quick USC transfer portal check-in. Everybody left. Nobody wants to play for Lincoln Riley. Those brothers left. Zion and Zachariah Branch left. Nobody is left at USC. Mm-hmm. Lincoln Riley went to California and torpedoed a blue blood. Oh, my God. Thank God he's not the North. Penn State, how are they doing? They haven't done much yet because they're too busy trying to win a national title.
They are too busy. They have not lost a lot yet, other than Bo Perbula, and they've not added a ton yet. But they are clearly trying to rework their receiver room. And
yes, they are.
Penn State has done that with the addition of Devontae Ross from Troy, who's first team All Sun Belt this year, 1,043 receiving yards, and just absolutely torched Iowa. Was that in week 3? I think that game was. I think he had. I'm trying to remember. I should have looked it up. I think he had 2 60+ yard receiving touchdowns and also a punt return for a touchdown in that game. Just lit him up. And he's very good, fast, productive guy. And Penn State also added Kyron Hudson from USC, who I think maybe we might have mentioned at least once. That's more of a well-regarded recruit, hasn't quite hit the way people thought he would yet, but measurables wise and traits wise is a guy you think has a fairly high ceiling. So they're coming into the receiver room, and they did a similar thing on the defensive line with Enai White from Texas A&M, who is a Philadelphia high school kid who went to A&M obviously as a high 4-star. I think it was the time he was a 5-star in the 2022 class. Didn't play a ton at A&M, had a knee injury that he was working back from, but that's another player that if you can get him to get closer to what people thought his ceiling was coming out of high school, then you might have yourself a pretty productive edge rusher. So that's it thus far, just those 3. I think Penn State would probably like to add more on the defensive line, perhaps even more at receiver. We'll see, maybe depending on what Nick Singleton and Katron Allen decide to do, if running back becomes a spot that Penn State might look at too. But I don't know that it's going to be a huge portal class for Penn State. It typically isn't, but they're off to a pretty good start so far.
They might have added their number 1 and 2 receivers for next year. Is that possible?
Yeah, I think so.
Which is kind of a huge deal. By the way, do you know, is there any history of a receiver from Troy jumping up a level and being any good? Do you know if that's ever happened before?
I actually don't. Is there a very obvious answer to that?
Tez Johnson. So all he has to do is beat Tez Johnson.
Yeah.
All he has to do is beat Tez Johnson. What did Tez Johnson do? He revolutionized Oregon football. Mm-hmm. So this has a chance to be, and again, this was the last piece for Penn State. And they went out and got A.J. Harris and Jalen Kimber out of the SEC at corner last year. Boom, boom. Answer. If this could be 75% at receiver, what they did at corner last year. They've tried at times in the portal at receiver. They've tried. They had a MAC guy on the way up. They got Julian Fleming coming from Ohio State, but I think these are better tries.
Yes, so, I agree with that.
I think these have you can roll your eyes a little bit, and until a Penn State receiver does it, then again, Chris Godwin, but Chris Godwin's a long time ago now. So KJ Hamler, we get it. They've had him in the past. They just haven't had him in the recent past. This is the last piece. Drew Aller said he's staying. This is the last piece. Mm-hmm. If Penn State can get this figured out, and they like the quarterback coming up in the system, this is how Penn State goes to the top level, Bill. Because we talk about this, the do your jobness. Penn State's been at the front of the do your job rankings all year, but then are they explosive enough at the very top level? The answer right now is probably no. How often have we talked about Penn State's lack of explosion on the outside? So what do? The first thing they did in the portal is address that. So good for them.
Yeah, I mentioned Penn State's lack of explosion at receiver every time we talk about them. So
that is correct.
They needed to do something about it, and it seems like they have.
James Franklin's going to send you a text. Do you like that, Landis? Do you like that? You know who could use some explosion on the outside? Lincoln Riley, because his whole team left. Ohio State, also very particular in the portal. They've added 5 guys so far, but we saw it with Ohio State last year. Very targeted, not giant, not huge numbers, but targeted. We need this, we need that, we need this, and this feels kind of like that.
It's similar, yeah. So Ohio State only added 6 guys in last year's cycle for as much fanfare as Ohio State's transfer portal got. It was 6 guys. Right now it's 5. I think there'll be more here, but the 5 they have so far are pretty good additions. It's only the number 31 overall class because there's only 5 commits by 24/7 Sports, but it's number 5 overall by individual player rating because the Buckeyes have landed Max Clare from Purdue. I think Max Clare, at least if you go by returning production, will be considered by some the best returning tight end in college football next year.
Okay.
He's more of a receiving threat than he is a blocking threat. But he is a very dynamic receiver for that position. Added C.J. Donaldson, running back from West Virginia, 2 offensive linemen, one of which we've mentioned before, Philip Daniels from Minnesota, and also from Rice, Ethan Onianwa, offensive tackle with 1 year of eligibility remaining. Philip Daniels actually has 3 years of eligibility remaining. So, but I think those are probably your starting tackles next year for Ohio State. Philip Daniels on the right side and Ethan Onyanwa on the left side. And
Which
then
is
Logan George. Yeah.
Ohio State, in the midst of this attempted national title run, probably added their 2 starting tackles from Minnesota and Rice just now. Isn't that weird? College football. Isn't it weird?
Yeah, well, we're going to say the same thing about Oregon in a second.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Logan George from Idaho State, defensive end, all Big Sky, led the Big Sky with 19.5 tackles for loss this past season. I believe he has 2 years of eligibility left. So 2 offensive linemen, 1 defensive lineman, 1 running back, 1 tight end. I think CJ Donaldson will probably be in a starting running back tandem similar to what he was at West Virginia at Ohio State, along with James Peoples. But that they needed experience in that room, like because that room was going to be all second-year guys and freshmen if they didn't add anybody next year for Ohio State. So Donaldson has played a ton at West Virginia, has been pretty productive. So that was a not only needed production added to the room, but needed experience added there too.
This is by far the most proactive on the offensive line, at tackle at least, that Ohio State's been in this era. Because they added Josh Simmons from San Diego State a couple years ago, who wound up being a 2-year starter from them, but they got him in the last window and it felt like they missed a lot. Like, we've seen Ohio State need tackles. It's like, oh, they're got to get some tackles in the portal. They don't get them. And now they got 2. They got 2 of the really good ones. And Oregon did the same thing. But Oregon's, I think, Oregon got a Johnny Cornelius in the portal before at tackle, and it worked. And so this, like, Oregon's done this before. This is kind of like new territory for Ohio State to be this proactive on the offensive line and have it work.
I don't know if that's, I mean, they got Josh Simmons. Josh Simmons worked. Yeah. Seth McLaughlin worked. If you want to go back a few years, Jonah Jackson worked. So I don't. They've been here before.
Not a tackle. I always felt like they were grasping, but they grasped.
Why is Oregon in a different world? Because it got one. Like,
they had a better plan. Like, I thought they got, because everybody wanted Cornelius and Oregon got him. Well, one's enough. Okay.
Okay.
So the bottom line is we have 2 teams who are getting ready to play in a quarterfinal that has everybody's attention, and they added 4 tackles that are probably 4 starting tackles for them next year, because we have to do everything at once right now. But Ohio State did it, and Oregon also did it.
Oregon did it with Isaiah World from Nevada, who, it's interesting. I think, like, Isaiah World was considered by a lot of people the best tackle available in the transfer portal. But when Ohio State got Ethan Onyanwa, Tom Luganbill from ESPN said, like, I can't believe this guy didn't go pro. He was the best tackle in the portal by a mile. So I guess there are varying opinions on who the best tackle was. But Ohio State got one good one, and Oregon got one too in Isaiah World. Oregon also got Alex Harkey from Texas State, who's I think a younger player, has a couple years of eligibility left. And was a former, I think he's a former Power Conference commit who ended up at Texas State and is not coming back to the Power Conferences. Another good tackle. Those should be your 2 starting tackles at Oregon next year, I would assume. Isaiah World and Alex Harkey. Oregon also got Dylan Thieneman from Purdue, who may end up being, when we look back, perhaps the best player overall in the portal, losing both starting safeties from this year's defense and going to replace at least one of those spots with Dylan Thieneman. Jamari Johnson, tight end from Louisville, has not done a whole lot in his career yet, but he's like a Bruce Feldman freaks list guy and was a pretty highly regarded recruit. So maybe he's the guy who might slot in there for Terrence Ferguson, or if Kenyon Sadiq is moving up, then he can be the number 2 tight end for Oregon next year. Maybe the most interesting portal addition anyone has made, just because it's a name that people know because he's bounced around a whole lot, is Bear Alexander from USC, and also of Georgia, and also of, I think, like 6 different high schools in the process of getting to this point. I think talent and potential through the roof has also never come close to sniffing it. So maybe Oregon is the program that can bring that out of Bear Alexander. And then one that flew under the radar because it happened right around the same time as Dylan Thieneman was Theron Johnson from Northwestern, cornerback, who was Northwestern's like only all Big Ten player last year, or this past season. Very good cornerback, is also going to go to the Ducks. So only 6 commits for the Ducks, number 12 class overall, number 2 by average player rating, because they know what they're doing when it comes to the portal.
They rebuilt their secondary and their interior defensive line last year in the portal, and it worked great. So they're going back there again. They're quite good at this. The other playoff team working the portal, Notre Dame, only 4 guys so far, not a ton, but very targeted. Devontae Smith, an Ohio high school kid who went to Alabama, has the same name as the guy who won the Heisman at Alabama, but it's not the same guy. He's going to go to Notre Dame, and fit somewhere in their secondary, cornerback or safety. They've had to play some young guys there with the Ben Morrison injury. So I think like he will help them. And then they need receivers, and they went and got Virginia's best receiver and Wisconsin's best receiver. So that was their plan. They got Malachi Fields from Virginia. He went 55 for 808 this year. He had double the receiving yards of anybody else in the Virginia offense. And then Will Pauling, who was the guy I mentioned off the top with Wisconsin, didn't have the production this year, had kind of a star-crossed year at Wisconsin. A lot of people did, but had really good production last year. And when they worked, you knew he was their best guy. So he's like a slot guy, but I think he's going to wind up being... Jordan Faison looked pretty good last game for Notre Dame. I think Will Pauling might lead Notre Dame in receiving next year.
It's a very similar Penn State conversation. It's like, this is not the first time that Notre Dame has tried to do this, and like it hasn't hit yet the way that people had hoped it would. But I like Will Pauling; he's a good player. So if anyone was going to do it, I wouldn't be surprised if it was him.
Yeah, and he's done it like at this level. Like this is like a sideways move almost. And the same with Fields. Like these are productive power conference guys. So you're not asking, right? Usually we talk about the portal. You're getting a guy kind of on his way down from a better program or on his way up from a smaller program. These are guys coming in from the side, from Virginia and Wisconsin, who have done it at Virginia and Wisconsin. So if they can do it there, they can do it here. Mm-hmm. And so I think they're going to matter a lot for CJ Carr and that Notre Dame offense last year. So again, Notre Dame's not doing a ton. Notre Dame and Penn State, great comparison by you. Like they've barely added anybody, but they're both playoff teams that need more explosion on the outside. And we know we've been right to talk about that because it's the one thing they've done so far. Yeah. It was the only thing they've had time to do. Everything else, they're kind of like, hey, hold on, wait. We have a playoff to do. But at receiver, they didn't wait, which is proof that they don't think they're good enough there right now.
Yeah. I appreciate the validation. Thank you.
Yeah. Congratulations. Well done by you, Bill Landis. The one thing, and Wetzel and I talked about this earlier this year, this idea, and we're talking about some of these playoff teams have not done as much, right? Indiana's done 10, but if they weren't in the playoff, they'd probably be at 15 or 20 right now.
Sure.
I theorized to Dan that this is the closest we can get to a draft in college football where being bad gives you an advantage, because it is the major thing that is different from the pros. That in the pros, being bad gets you somewhere. In college, it doesn't. But if being bad gives you a jump on the portal because the other teams are busy, and Kansas had a disappointing year, and they have more portal guys than anybody in the North. Wisconsin had a disappointing year, and they have a top 10 portal class right now, right? I actually think as much as you could look at it and say, man, that's not fair to Penn State and Notre Dame and Oregon and Ohio State, but actually maybe it's designed to be not fair, because what those programs we talked about, Ohio State and Oregon at tackle, Penn State and Notre Dame at receiver, they were able to target what they really needed, but there's not as much like overall addition, and probably they don't need it. But I maybe like the bad teams getting a jump, Landis. Like it's not on purpose, because nothing in college football is on purpose.
Right.
But if you're not in a bowl, you don't have bowl practice, and you're more focused on this, and that gives you an edge. Good. You're bad. You need more help. You get a jump in the portal.
I don't mind that. My only pushback to that would be what's going to happen to the programs who currently don't have the time to focus on the portal as much, and then once their season's over, their rosters are going to blow up, and then like all of a sudden there's no one left for them to go get. So like I don't know if that part of it's fair.
Like the mid-level teams who went 7-5.
No, I mean like Penn State. Like if when Penn State's season ends, whether it be next week or 3 weeks from now,
yeah,
and 15 players decide to go into the portal, and Penn State loses a bunch of depth.
Right.
But they couldn't address those needs because they were actively playing for a championship, and those guys wanted to stick around. And now that they have to address those needs, there aren't players available to do it.
Yeah. It's a disadvantage because you're good. Just like in pro sports, being good is a disadvantage for the future.
Yeah, but you don't lose your roster in pro sports. Like you can, players under contract, I understand that, but like.
So in pro sports, there's an advantage to being bad in the draft. In free agency, everything's equal. In college sports, in recruiting, everything's equal. And there's actually an advantage to being good because more guys want to go there. So then the only way to give any advantage to the bad teams is through college football free agency. So it's like the one place. And so I know what you're saying, but if we want to turn over the teams that are good, maybe this is a way to do it. It's like, oh, Penn State was really good. What happened? And it was like, well, they actually had the thing happen that you said. They took a little bit of a step back, and then that, I don't know. It's not on purpose. It would only be an accident. But I think you can look at it and say it's not fair, except maybe it's not fair with a purpose because we have this crazy calendar as it is right now. So anyway, all right. Last break. When we come back, we're going to run through all of our bowl teams. So not the playoff teams, not the teams who missed bowls. Everybody else, the northern teams, what are they doing in the portal? We'll do it next on Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis, back on Kings of the North along with producer Mike. Thanks to you guys for being here. Give us a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell to get notifications because next week we probably won't be as on it with the noon Eastern starts. In fact, we promise that. Our Monday and Tuesday shows next week, Landis, on the 30th and 31st. At least on the 30th, it's not going to be at noon Eastern. But it's going to be sometime in the later afternoon or early evening, and it's going to be live on the ground. Who we talk to, what the vibes are, anything we can bring you from the Rose Bowl and from the Sugar Bowl. So it will be a jam-packed Monday and Tuesday show, maybe just at a different time. But again, if you're used to this, we've never done a show. We do the late night shows, but our weekly shows have always been at noon. That's not going to be the case next week. So just be ready to roll with us.
Yeah, we don't know yet whether it's going to be like mid-afternoon or more of like an evening/night deal. I think we'll have to get a feel for that once we're on site and figure out the timing of things. It's the Rose Bowl, man. 3-hour time difference. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
Yeah. So we're going to be bringing you all that. And then we'll be doing, so I think we'll do it right. The 31st, New Year's Eve. We got to figure out if people want to hang out on New Year's Eve, but I think they want to do at least a little bit. So we'll have some reaction. We won't be there, but we'll have some reaction from Penn State, Boise State on New Year's Eve. And then certainly after the Sugar Bowl on New Year's Day, we will react to all three games, just like we reacted to all three games on Saturday of the first round. So like, be ready for that. And that will be a show that is Bill just took in the Rose Bowl. What's up? And I think you'll probably be in your hotel and I will be live in the Superdome after the end of the Sugar Bowl. As soon as that baby ends, we'll get on and do this thing. So like, it's just going to be a lot of stuff popping, baby. All right.
It will be.
Speaking of popping, how's Michigan doing in the portal, Bill Landis?
They're doing well in the portal. We talked about Mikey Keene, their Fresno State quarterback. I guess there's still a chance Michigan might add another quarterback, DeQuan Finn, former Toledo and Baylor quarterback. I think he was visiting Michigan as Mikey Keene was committing to Michigan. So I actually don't think it would be unreasonable for Michigan to try to add 2 veteran quarterbacks to its room as they prepare for the future with Bryce Underwood. So we'll see if that ends up happening or if DeQuan Finn might look elsewhere now that Michigan got Mikey Keene. So they got a quarterback. Justice Haynes, running back from Alabama, former 5-star recruit, hasn't popped, I think, the way people hoped he might. And there's a couple of guys in Michigan's class that I think fit that mold. But I think another guy that'll be probably in a tandem with Jordan Marshall next year. So like a more experienced guy with a younger guy in Michigan's backfield. I think they did a similar thing with Troy Bowles, a linebacker from Georgia, another highly regarded recruit who hasn't yet broken through. And then Damon Payne, the defensive tackle from Alabama, is older than all those guys. He was a 5-star prospect in the 2021 recruiting class. He's a Michigan native and was mostly just kind of like a role player at Alabama. But Michigan will obviously be retooling in the middle of its defensive line, although I guess there's some scuttlebutt that Kenneth Grant might come back this year. But even if he does, Michigan, still needs help with defensive tackle, and they're hoping that Damon Payne in his last year could make a jump there. A couple other additions: Brady Norton, offensive lineman from Cal Poly, played tackle there. I guess could play tackle or interior at Michigan. He has 3 years of eligibility left. He was a fairly highly coveted FCS up transfer on the offensive line. They got a pair of brothers from Arkansas, and TJ and Tavis Metcalf. They're DK Metcalf's cousins, I think.
Okay.
TJ Metcalf is a pretty versatile DB, like safety who play in the slot, has played a little bit of corner. Tavis is a younger player. He's got 4 years of eligibility left. And then Donovan McCulley, receiver from Indiana, like big-bodied athlete who just never really found the role for the Hoosiers this year, but I think has some upside as a pass catcher, clearly, and we know Michigan needs that as well. So not a huge portal clash as of yet. I don't know that'll be a gigantic one, but another team that's been pretty targeted and I think has had some good success.
Okay. And again, that Wayshawn Parker I talked about from Washington State going to Utah, I said he's the number 2 running back in the portal for 24/7. Justice Haynes is number 1. So like this could
Kenneth
be
Grant declared for the draft 15 minutes ago. So I take back what I said.
Yep. Sorry. News is popping. Justice Haynes could be a big one. Justice Haynes could be a big one in that offense and what they try to do. So pretty good work. And they're gonna be better at quarterback, which is what matters most. They didn't hit it out of the park in the portal at quarterback, but I think they did what they needed to do.
I don't know that they were trying to necessarily.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
With Bryce Underwood, one with the talent of Bryce Underwood, but also the financial commitment to Bryce Underwood. I don't know that they were like really looking to take that kind of swing. Yeah.
All right. BC. Boston College getting ready to take the field soon, a couple days in their bowl game. Another offensive lineman, interesting guy on the way up from Merrimack, Amir Johnson. 6'4", 300 pounds, 3 years of eligibility left. Like you like a swing on that. Started every game this past year at left tackle. So like a good lower level left tackle coming up to Boston College is big. But they also lost 3 receivers in the portal, including Jaron Bradley, who signed with a different one of our northern teams that we'll get to. He's the guy from Texas Tech, who when I was at spring football, he's 6'5" for BC. I was like, this guy's going to go crazy, and he had like 6 catches the whole year. So they lost a couple guys. They added VJ Wilkins, a little guy from Campbell, 500-yard receiver in the portal. But the big thing is this is Eli Holstein part 2. It is another Alabama quarterback coming north, and it's Dylan Lonergan, who was another big-time recruit at Alabama. He visited North Carolina and Georgia also in this portal cycle and picked Bill O'Brien and Boston College because Bill O'Brien at Alabama was involved in his recruitment originally. He has not done much at Alabama in 2 years, but this has a chance. Like, this is big, Landis. They still have Shaker Rising coming in as a quarterback recruit who's a big deal, and they still have Grayson James sticking around from this year. But Dylan Lonergan from Bama to BC, has a chance to be a huge portal move, I think.
Yeah, he and Eli Holstein, I think when they both went to Alabama together were viewed like similarly. I don't recall exactly what their ratings were, but it was like either one of these guys could be the future. And I think Lonergan was the baseball player. There was one of the pair was like a baseball player, and people weren't sure like if football was 100% going to be the deal. I'm pretty sure it was Lonergan, but obviously, football is now. So he's got some upside. I like the swing there for Boston College. Like it feels like a relatively low risk one with Grayson James still in the fold. So yeah, I don't mind it.
And he's a Georgia native again, just like Eli Holstein. These are not northern guys. These are southern kids who committed to Alabama, who then when they are looking for a chance came north. Like that's what we got to be doing. So take these swings. And if this is part of what Bill O'Brien's going to be, just like we talked about with Mike Loxley, if you are a head coach, and again, these were both guys who worked with QBs at Alabama, a head coach with a reputation. Think about what Tua was. Talia Tagovailoa transferred from Alabama to Maryland and had the career he had at Maryland with Mike Loxley because he went to Alabama, knew Loxley there, and then said, I'll go play for that guy. So this is... No, I'm all in on northern schools getting Alabama backup quarterbacks. You good with that? I'm good with it.
I'm good with it.
Minnesota, they're doing portal work.
They are doing portal work. Who's your guy? Who's the quarterback? The young kid that you like?
Drake Lindsay.
His name is escaping me. Drake Lindsay. Thank you. So Minnesota went out and got Zach Pyron from Georgia Tech. He's got 2 years of eligibility remaining, but I think you and I both maybe are reviewing that as a bridge to Drake Lindsay or an experienced guy to be in the room to help Drake Lindsay as he takes over the offense.
I think that, and maybe be a wrinkle third down Wildcat quarterback.
Okay. So they did that. Also in the backfield, AJ Turner from Marshall, I think, is a really good running back. They added him, pair him with Darius Taylor. I like that combo. They also got Cole Cabana from Michigan, who hasn't done much yet in his career, but was I think a decent recruit. Javon Tracy, receiver from Miami, Ohio, 818 receiving yards this past season, 7 touchdowns, 57 receptions, by far his most productive year. So he's going to go to Minnesota now and try to show that production can translate. And then 2, Minnesota has 15 total commits. I'm not running through all of them. I'm just running through the ones that were most interesting to me. So 2 more are on the defensive line. Rashawn Lawrence from Stony Brook is like mostly a defensive tackle, but did play on the edge some. He was the highest rated defensive lineman in the FCS, according to PFF, who does do FCS grades.
There you go.
That. And then Steven Curtis from Illinois State, another like pretty productive interior, I think more of an interior guy, 7 tackles for loss, 5 sacks this past year. So like, do you want to fill your entire Big Ten defense with a bunch of up transfers? Probably not necessarily. But if you're getting guys who have proven production at the FCS level, I don't mind the swing. And Minnesota is trying to do it with 2 guys there, and Rashawn Lawrence and Steven Curtis. So, like I said, 15 commits for Minnesota. They lost a lot too. Like, I don't know that they lost a ton of high impact guys other than Phillip Daniels, but they did lose quite a few players, or have lost quite a few players in the portal. So they had to have a big portal class, but it's not a bad class for Minnesota with the 15 they have. It's the 12th rated class in 24/7 Sports, but that's a volume thing. If you go by average player rating, it's not quite that high. But good class for PJ Fleck, I think.
I think PJ Fleck knows what he's doing. I think he's got a handle on it. I really do. I think he knows exactly where Minnesota fits into this. And like, losing Phillip Daniels stinks for Minnesota.
It does.
That they go get an underrated guy out of Ohio that Ohio State didn't offer. They develop him. He starts as a young guy, and then Ohio State steals him. It's like, that's what programs like this have to deal with. Oh, that guy, in the past years, he would have been a 4-year starter at Minnesota, and now he's going to be a 3-year starter at Ohio State. So it's a bit of an uphill battle, like this middle tier, but I like how Minnesota's going about it. So good for them. All right. Rutgers, not a ton, 6 guys. They got Marshall's best cornerback, Jacoby Henderson. He probably slides in as a starter in that defensive backfield. And then they got a receiver. They've done some good stuff in the portal at receiver. So DT Sheffield, he's from North Texas. I will say it is tremendously confusing when a football player has the initials of a different position than he plays. So I was reading stories about WRDT Sheffield, and it's like, who is this? Does he have one name? Has he played 2 positions and he has a single name? And it's no, he's a receiver with the initials DT. He caught 66 passes for 822 yards and 11 touchdowns at North Texas last year. He visited Rutgers, and they like locked him down before he could get on a planned visit to Washington. So like, sometimes the best way to figure out if you're doing a good job is who are you keeping guys away from? So this guy was going to go to Washington. Rutgers said, no, stay here. And they signed him. So good. That seems to me like a good move by Rutgers then. So not a ton. He's only a 5'10" guy, but I imagine we're going to be talking about DT Sheffield next year, catching passes from the Greek rifle, Ethan Kaliakmanis.
And not getting his position wrong when we talk about him.
And not getting him. I will get it wrong repeatedly, I'm sure. I'm like, Bill, I don't know. I just don't think 170 pounds is big enough for an interior defensive lineman. Like, Doug, those are his initials. He's a receiver. So get ready for that. All right, Washington dipping into the Arizona well with Jed Fish again. Got Jacob Manu, middle linebacker, former first-team All Pac-12 guy. That's a pretty high-impact transfer addition. I think that'll be a nice piece to help solidify a defense that's in transition, losing its defensive coordinator, losing, I think, a couple players to the transfer portal. Also added Samode Pepa, defensive lineman from Utah, big guy. He's like 6'4", I think, like 330 in the middle of that defensive line. Couple of offensive line additions that have been key, I think, as well for Washington, which had a whole lot of offensive line issues this past season. Went out and got Carver Willis from Kansas State, was Kansas State's starting right tackle this year. I think he's made 18 career starts at that position.
And they also got Garion Hatchett, who was at Washington, transferred to Oklahoma, got hurt and didn't play at all this past season, but he's coming back to Washington, where he's from, and probably will be in competition to be a starting guard for the Huskies this year. And then an interesting up transfer from Northern Arizona, Alex McLaughlin, who's a former FCS freshman All-American, really productive player for Northern Arizona. That maybe I think Cam Fabiculanan is out of eligibility. Maybe this can be the replacement for him.
Okay. So they're doing all right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Syracuse. They got a kicker from Iowa, so that's good. That always seems like a good thing to get.
They know kickers.
Woody. They know kickers.
They get a kicker named Tripp. I don't like that.
Yeah. Fran Brown Jr. is transferring to Syracuse to play for his dad. Had been at St. Francis, Pennsylvania. Appeared in 7 games as a linebacker, 33 tackles. You knew that? You knew that the St. Francis PA mascot was the Red Flash?
Mm-hmm.
You're a ball knower. So that's cool. This is another one for you. Nikhil Bertrand, offensive tackle from Alabama. He's from Philly, is transferring. He had been at Texas A&M, transferred to Alabama this year. Now is transferring to Syracuse. 1 year left. I think he's probably going to be a starting tackle for them. He had been originally recruited by Elijah Robinson to Texas A&M, who's now the defensive coordinator at Syracuse. So like some good connections there. But this is the thing that really matters. I'm burying the lead. Might have gotten their quarterback, but it's not exactly what we thought, but has a chance to hit. Ricky Collins has been at LSU the past 2 years. Yeah. He's been the 3rd string guy at LSU the past 2 years. He wasn't even the backup any year. But Garrett Nussmeier announces he's staying at LSU for 2025. And so this is what happens, right? If your returning starter stays, you're going to lose your room a little bit. So he's a former Elite 11 finalist. He's like a major recruit. He's a dual threat guy. And we had been, Connor Wegman or Caden Salter, we've been thinking about what Syracuse is going to do. They got Ricky Collins, who has 3 years of eligibility, has not really played, but was a giant 4-star quarterback recruit. And again, this is what the North should be doing. And I don't mind tipping my cap to the South on this stuff. If the North can pull some of these SEC backup quarterbacks and take swings on them, this has a chance, Landis. We could be talking, and this was Jaden Daniels. When this kid was a freshman, Jaden Daniels, as he was winning the Heisman, was like, this is my guy. So this guy learned from the best, then was behind Garrett Nussmeier this year. Great swing by Syracuse, might be the guy. We have to see. There's still, like, we've run through it on previous shows. You've run through it. Could Kyle McCord still somehow get an extra year? His appeal was denied, reportedly. Could he get a second? Could he appeal again? But if not, Ricky Collins might be the quarterback for LSU or for Syracuse in 2025 and beyond.
I forgot about Ricky Collins. That's interesting. Yeah.
You're into it?
I'm intrigued by it. I don't like, I'm not, I still need to figure out exactly what Syracuse wants to be offensively, but to know like what kind of quarterback I think would fit best there. But you mentioned Nikhil Bertrand. Not only is he from Philadelphia, he's from Northeast Philadelphia. He went to Northeast High School. That's where all of our finest young men come from. So
there you go. Look at you. Ricky Collins was the number 17 quarterback and the number 231 national player in the class of 2023 by the 24/7 composite. So I don't know if they feel like they need a bridge to him, but he's a 3rd-year guy. And he's been learning, he was in the same room as a Heisman winner. So I get it. Maybe it's not what we thought Syracuse would do, but I get it. So we'll see how that goes. All right. Pitt has not done a ton. They've lost 10 players, including Nate Yarnell, the quarterback that we talked about earlier. Only 2 guys in, 2 or 3 in so far. They got a kicker from Murray State. I think it's 3, the guys they've added so far. Kicker from Murray State. They got a receiver. And then they need help on the offensive line. And they have gotten a guy on the offensive line. Kendall Stanley was an offensive tackle at Charlotte. Started all 12 games at right tackle this past year. And once Branson Taylor got hurt at left tackle for Pitt and they had to remove Ryan Baer from right tackle to left tackle, they never figured out right tackle in the second half of the year at Pitt. And they now just added a guy who started at right tackle this entire last year. I think he's going to be the starting right tackle for Pitt next season. And he has multiple years of experience So I think like that's a good grab. And he had a bunch of good offers out of the portal, so that Pitt won this battle for Kendall Stanley. I think we'll be hearing from him on the offensive line. They just haven't done a ton otherwise so far.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Need more.
Nardog.
Need
now
more.
you're worried about Nardog now. Now you're back on. Now you're like, Doug loved Nardog, and Bill was a little worried about Nardog. And for the first half of the year, I was right. But now you're like, I told you, I'm a little worried. They got to get more active.
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little worried. Yeah.
Yeah. Only 2 or 3 guys added so far. All right, Nebraska.
Pretty good, Nebraska. Number 9 overall portal class, according to 24/7 Sports, with 11 commitments. Some really, really fascinating additions here. Desan McCullough. Actually, let's not start with him. Let's start with Williams Winery, who was the number 1 overall player, I believe, in a 2024 recruiting class, at least by some. Missouri kept him home, and he stayed for a few months, and now he's going to Nebraska. I like measurables off the charts. Like if you were going to build a defensive lineman in a factory, this is what he would look like. They just got to like get it out of him now. But Nebraska needs help at defensive tackle, and they're going to take a swing on a kid that has all the talent in the world. So I'm fascinated to see what happens there with him. Either way, like it's going to be, he will be one of the more like watched transfers, I think, next year, or like just the kind of guy you're kind of keeping tabs on to see how that develops. Desan McCullough, who I mentioned, like linebacker edge type. I don't know if he prefers to play off ball or on the ball, but he's pretty athletic and is pretty versatile, I think. And he will be for Nebraska's defense. 2 good receivers, starting with Dane Key from Kentucky. He was Kentucky's leading receiver last year. Very highly sought after receiver transfer, and Nebraska got him to give Dylan Raiola some weapons. I just thought like we talked like going into this past season or this season, like we liked what Nebraska had at receiver, but then I just don't really think any of it hit, right? So they're kind of taking a swing at it again with Dane Key and Naziah Hunter from Cal, another fairly highly sought after receiver transfer. Andrew Marshall from Idaho is first team All Big Sky cornerback added to the defense. Jalen George from East Tennessee is a first team All SoCon defensive lineman they're adding to the defense. And then your favorite Marcus Davila, quarterback from Purdue, is going to come in and back up Dylan Raiola. So just really nice work out of Nebraska. Even from a average player rating standpoint, they actually stack up okay with their 11 commits. So important offseason for Matt Rule and his staff, including addressing some actual staff holes that he had to do. But from a player transfer portal perspective, Nebraska is nailing it a little bit, at least on paper.
So we have 2 big-time Northern coaches, Big Ten coaches, entering year 3 who have the 2 best transfer portal classes in the North, and Wisconsin and Nebraska, because Luke Fickell and Matt Rule know dorking around time is over. It's go time.
It certainly is. Yes, it is go time.
Hey guys, dorking around time is over. I don't think what they'll announce it to them. We'll send them a letter.
No.
Iowa State haven't done a ton. Looking at 5 guys so far, but it feels like they got the Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins replacements, which is super important to do. Chase Sowell is a 6'4" receiver from East Carolina, played 2 seasons at East Carolina, has 2 seasons left. In 2 years at East Carolina, had 81 receptions for 1,300 yards. Finished this season 19.9 yards per reception. So that's pretty good. And then they got a slot guy, Xavier Townsend. This feels like the Jalen Noel replacement. Played 29 games in 3 years at UCF. Not a ton of stats, but more like a little guy. So like they're losing the best receiver combo in the country, or one of the best receiver combos in the country. And again, they had to address that. So this is different. Notre Dame and Penn State had to immediately address receiver because they haven't had it. And Iowa State had to immediately address receiver because they had it better than they'll have it in their entire history as a football program. And they've got to immediately replace it. So they did lose their backup quarterback in the portal, JJ Cole. But not a ton so far, but at least they got after receiver, which they needed to figure out. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that they'll ever have huge portal classes at Iowa State. Right?
I don't think it's how Matt Campbell is going to prefer to do business.
Yeah.
Kansas State. I think Kansas State hit on a couple different guys that is just like, that's exactly how you do this. So one is Gabe Powers, who was a huge recruit at Ohio State, 4-star prospect at Ohio State, and has just never been able to get on the field. But he was a top 100 national recruit, Landis, in the class of 2022. And I think Gabe Powers is going to go to Kansas State and has a chance to be an all Big 12 linebacker immediately.
Yeah, I think he's a good player. He got caught in between a little bit. Some like Sonny Styles reclassifying and being able to play early, Cody Simon being a bit of a stalwart there. And they're recruiting well at the position too with some younger guys coming up. So I think he stands a very good chance to still have a good college career at Kansas State.
Yeah. So that's a good one. Jaron Bradley is the guy I mentioned earlier from Boston College, who just did nothing at Boston College this year. But had been a really good receiver before that. It just didn't work. And so this felt like a priority for Kansas State. Again, he's 6'5", 222. He really looks the part, man. He had 6 catches this year. I don't know what happened at Boston College, but it felt like Kansas State got after him right away. They got after Gunnar Maldonado, who was a captain at Arizona this year, which always feels like a big deal to me. He's a safety, so he's going to come in, I think, and be a leader in the back end of that defense. And then they also got a corner named Jaden Rowe, who was at Oklahoma. So, and they prioritized him. He was their first guy, and they got on him right away in the portal. And they had been a guy, this is how this works, right? You plant seeds. They had been all over him in high school in the class of 2022. And then he was kind of hurt at Oklahoma for 2 years. And so now when he's searching, he winds up back with people that he knows. So there's just a couple things here that happened with Kansas State that I like on multiple levels. That's like a big swing on a super talented receiver, a big swing on a super talented linebacker who just kind of was stuck behind people. Then like a guy, it's just like, I don't know exactly what Chris Kleiman ideally wants to do at Kansas State. They only have 7 guys so far, but I like the specificity of the guys they got.
You know what? Gunnar Maldonado was a really good player 2 years ago. But you know what I like most about Gunnar Maldonado? Triple Wildcat. Started his career at Northwestern. Then he went to Arizona, and now he's at Kansas State.
Oh, wow. That's a very good pitch by Kansas State, too. He probably might even have a tattoo. And it's like, keep your tattoos. You're good.
Yeah.
Okay. Next up is BYU. They're having like a winding road to wind up with a guy who they have connections to, which is Andrew Gentry, who started a couple games at right tackle for Michigan this year and then got hurt. He was a 4-star prospect out of high school. His dad and his older brother both played at BYU. And he was committed and he went on a mission. He was committed to Virginia. While he was on his mission, Jim Harbaugh got on him. And when he came back from his mission, he went to Michigan instead of Virginia. But now he's going to BYU. He has a lot that his dad and his brother played there. He's probably going to be the starting right tackle at BYU. So again, just like targeted, we want this guy. Michigan had some problems on the offensive line. He was one of the guys I think they tried to have be a solution. Then he got hurt and just was, I think he has a chance to go to BYU and really be good. Yeah. So this could be a huge get for them. Carson Ryan is going the Utah BYU transfer route. Which is like, hey, I want to play in the Holy War. This guy. Nice. I'm pretty sure this is the guy. He had 4 catches for 78 yards in the Colorado game. And I was like, who is this guy? Because that was the game after Brant Keithy got hurt. And I was like, here's Utah. They just always have a tight end. And this is a guy, I think he had his hair flowing out of the back of his helmet. I was like, this guy looks like a player. But really, that was kind of the only game he did anything. And now he's transferring to BYU. So that has a chance to hit for BYU. But in the end, I think getting Andrew Gentry's the really big deal here. And again, there's not a ton of stuff for them. Only 5 guys in the portal so far, but I like going out and getting it. I like anybody who targets a tackle and gets them. So we can go back and look. I'm going to go through. We'll go through in the offseason everybody, how they did in the portal, how many guys from the portal played meaningful snaps for our 28 Northern teams. But we'll also look like in spring football. I'll be super curious, Landis. 56 starting tackles projected for us. How many of them are portal guys from this cycle of those 56? That's 28 times 2 if you're not keeping up out there. 18, it's going to be a big number, right? We're just talking about Ohio State and Oregon potentially are going to have it at both tackles. And now we're just running through guys like Andrew Gentry and the Merrimack guy at BC. Like, you've got to do this. So successful tackle hunting in the portal gets our attention.
I think it's the hardest thing to do in the portal is find good tackles. Yeah.
A full off-season show on tackle portal hunting. You good with that?
Maybe.
Yeah. Iowa, what'd they do? Not much.
Only two guys. Hank Brown, a quarterback from Auburn. Iowa's poking around some other transfer quarterbacks, including Bo Perbula, who they did not get because he went to Missouri. So I'm guessing that Hank Brown is the presumed starter anyway for Iowa. And then the only other addition is Jonah Pace from Central Michigan. He's a defensive tackle. He'll probably be like a depth kind of tackle for them. He'll play. I think they brought him with the expectation that he'll definitely play in a tackle rotation. I don't know if he's going to start necessarily for Iowa. So that's it. Not a whole lot going on. I didn't lose a bunch, really, either like Cade McNamara, I think most notably they lost, and Caleb Brown at receiver, but that writing was on the wall, I think, for both those guys for a while. So fairly stable roster situation, I think, at Iowa. I don't know that they're going to do a whole lot more here other than the two they added.
Is Hank Brown enough? Like they needed to go get a quarterback. Like, is this say yes, Hank Brown? That's the answer.
I think it's a step short of that.
Okay.
Hank Brown played a little bit this past year at Auburn and maybe flashed some. I think there's a decent to good chance that Hank Brown gives you a whole lot more than Cade McNamara gave you. But I don't know what the ceiling is there. Good enough for Iowa probably to maintain its current position, good enough to elevate Iowa to something more. I'm not sold on that idea.
I'm just I'm curious about the sort of the tiers and the rankings and something like this. Indiana gets an experienced starter in Fernando Mendoza out of Cal.
Mm-hmm.
And Wisconsin gets Danny O'Neal, who started his whole freshman year at San Diego State, who's a bunch of film, right? And Iowa gets an Auburn guy who has a recruiting pedigree but hasn't played that much. And it's just who is getting sure things and who is getting, but this is, Brendan Sullivan, I guess, is still going to be there. So he could be the starting quarterback too.
Yeah.
But I thought maybe Iowa would get a little bit bigger swing at quarterback here. All right. Swinging in the portal. That's what Colorado does. 24/7 rankings. They're 14th overall right now. They have 12 guys so far, and they got one of the best guys in the portal, which is Jaheim Otis, who we have talked about. He's a defensive lineman from Alabama, was the number one defensive lineman in the 24/7 portal rankings, 6'5", 320. Had a big thing of he lost 100 pounds from high school into college and had all this, all these people fired up about him, and then has had some injury stuff. But this is, if you don't think Deion Sanders does enough in high school recruiting, it's he does a lot in the portal. And Jaheim Otis is a huge get, is it not?
Yeah, Colorado's done a nice job the last two cycles now. It seems like on the defensive line that was noticeable with them on the field this year. They're gonna need to maintain that, obviously, to stay at the top of the Big 12. So that's a huge get.
They got Joseph Williams is the receiver that was at Tulsa that committed to Utah and flipped to Colorado. So that was a big get to flip a guy that I think Utah was really excited about. He had 30 catches for 588 yards, was the American Athletic Conference Freshman of the Year. So you think about, if you're at Colorado, you're going to be running out receiver talent. They had another guy to add to that. They got a safety named Makari Vickers, who didn't play much at Oklahoma, but his nickname is the Seatbelt. It's a good nickname. And then Caden Salter. So the Liberty quarterback, Caden Salter, who also was viewed as a possibility for Syracuse. This is probably Colorado's starting quarterback next year. He's a super experienced guy. He will be the bridge to Juju Lewis. And this is a big win to go find somebody to replace Shadur Sanders and Caden Salter. That's very well done by Colorado to get a guy like that.
Yeah, Caden Salter had a weird kind of step back this past season, but was excellent 2 seasons ago when he also went to the portal after 2023 and ended up going back to Liberty. And then wasn't quite as good this past year, but he's got a ton of talent. can run. I think that's the thing for me that's most intriguing with that addition is that Shedeur Sanders, for all the things he does very well, did not do a whole lot for you in the designed run game. And while he scrambled some, I don't think he scrambled a bunch. Caden Salter's legs at the quarterback position will add something a little different to Colorado's offense than we've seen the last couple of years. So I'm excited to see that play out. Colorado also did lose Nakai Hill-Green, who was like, I would put him high up in the list of like guys who it's a bummer to lose from the North. He was a really good linebacker for them.
Okay. Illinois, what you got?
They got Wisconsin's defensive line.
Yes, they did.
only six for Illinois, but targeted again clearly along the defensive line. They got James Thompson, Kurt Neal, and Leon Lowry from Wisconsin, all three defensive linemen. Thompson is maybe the most interesting of that trio to me, although like Lowry is a pass rush specialist that I think will help Illinois quite a bit. Thompson basically missed all of this past season. I think he appeared in one game against Nebraska, but when he went out, like it just felt like at the time it was a huge blow to Wisconsin's defensive line, and then I think the season played out that they sort of really missed his presence, and now he's leaving the team entirely to go to Illinois and help bolster their defensive line. Like, you don't love it if you're Wisconsin, if you have three defensive linemen leave your program to go to a former Big Ten West foe in Illinois, but that's what happens. So the Illini are fortifying some things there. And then the only other one I want to mention for Illinois is Ethan Hampton, the quarterback from Northern Illinois, is transferring to Illinois. And like Luke Altmaier is coming back to be the starting quarterback for Illinois next year. And we know that Donovan Leary is leaving and I believe has since signed with Tulane. So Ethan Hampton, I guess, is just a replacement for Leary and like an older backup to Altmaier. But I also believe Hampton would have the opportunity to pursue a medical redshirt beyond this year if he wanted to. So he's your QB2 this fall behind Altmaier, but also the possibility to give you a very old QB1 in 2026 too, if he gets that extra year of eligibility. Pretty productive MAC quarterback this past season for NIU.
Okay. Last one is West Virginia, Rich Rodriguez. Not a ton so far. 5 guys. I'm like, hey, is he bringing the whole Jacksonville State team with him? You know, you're coming along. He's brought a couple guys from Jacksonville State. One is Jared Bowie, who is a West Virginia native. He had a couple. He's a receiver who had like a handful of catches the last couple of years, but Rich Rod knows him. He knows the offense, so he's a West Virginia guy who's going to come home to do that. They also added Jacob Barrick, who's the tight end from Jacksonville State, 6'3", 235, 3 years there. More of a blocker than a pass catcher, but at least 2 guys off the Rich Rod offense coming from Jacksonville State to West Virginia. Couple starters they probably have added. Jordy Scruggs, probable starter in the secondary. They need to rebuild that secondary. Secondary was an issue all year for West Virginia. They tried to get some guys in the portal last year. It didn't really work. Their defensive coordinator got fired in the middle of the year just basically because they couldn't cover anybody. And then their head coach got fired at the end of the year in part because they couldn't cover anybody. So they've got to rebuild that secondary. Jordy Scruggs was a good starter at South Alabama. He'll help there. Walter Youngbear from Tulsa was a third-team conference selection on the offensive line. He probably slots in as a starter at guard for West Virginia. And then Orrin Singleton is from Eastern Michigan. He's going to help out the offense. 64 catches for 639 yards last year in the MAC. So again, this is one of those things. If you have like more than 600 receiving yards in the MAC, someone's coming to get you, right? We should go through that. Yeah. How many of the top skill players in the MAC got plucked in the portal by a power conference team? So they plucked an Eastern Michigan receiver, all of them. So we'll do that. So, so Rich Rod's got a lot of work to do.
He does, but put me in the Walter Youngbear fan club.
Oh yeah, no, we'll get him on. Yeah.
I like his. I'm reading his bio. Lists the Kodiak bear and the rhino among his favorite animals.
Oh, I love rhinos. Where are you on rhinos?
I'm pro rhino. Yeah. And they tend to get overlooked. They're pretty cool.
Yeah. A lot of times the only discussion around rhinos is when they poop and people get, because it's just massive, but they have armor and a horn. They have a sword on their face, basically. Like, what's better than a rhino? Yeah. So, all right. That was worthwhile. We have a bunch of teams in the playoff that we're going to continue to talk about. 5 of the 8 remaining teams are from the North, but we also want to check in with everybody else. So if you want to join, we got 20 minutes till kickoff of Pitt Toledo. If you've missed some bowl games, who cares? Poolpartygaming.com. Come in and join our bowl pool there. And then Landis, we will see the folks sometime on Monday.
Yeah.
And we'll be in different spots. So come find us. Like we'll be here. We'll be in this podcast, the podcast feed. If you're listening on a podcast after it was live, if you're listening to a podcast, it'll be in this feed, maybe just a little bit later. And if you're watching on YouTube, it just won't be live at noon Eastern, but it'll be here. Like, come find us. Get the notifications. We're going to be here. We want to be your home for Northern college football as the North continues to dominate this playoff, and we're going to have a lot to talk about.
We will have a lot to talk about. I can't wait to hear about all your food excursions in New Orleans. You going to tear it up or what? You gumbo guy?
Mostly bun. I am not a po' boy guy, but I am a gumbo guy and a beignet guy.
Will you eat some gator? Will you eat like some blackened gator or no?
I don't know. Do I have to for the show? For what?
You don't have to. It's good. I like it. Yeah.
You like gator? Okay. Yeah. It is. I would eat anything that is a Southern football mascot. I will eat. So I need a bulldog. Would you eat a bulldog? I'd eat a bulldog.
I don't think I'd eat a bulldog. No,
I'd eat a bulldog.
I might draw the line there. Yeah.
I'd eat a bulldog if it was blackened. I definitely saw, I should have grabbed it to put on the show. I saw it was forwarded to us. At least one Northern college football fan got a sword for Christmas. So I hope we were inspiring people. So please be careful.
It was a big sword.
Yeah, no, it's bigger than my sword. Yeah. So everyone be careful out there. We hope you had a wonderful holiday, a great Christmas with family and friends. And now we're ready to dive back into college football. So thanks as always to our producer, Mike Yorstowski, for making us look good and sound good. Next time you see us, we will be live on the scene. And I don't know what the Radio Row setup is. I would love to be talking to people, Landis, from somewhere other than our hotel rooms, but I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah, I'm gonna poke around and try to find someplace other than my hotel room. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. So give you a little flavor. All right, that's it. Appreciate you guys being here. He's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.